Hi everyone, and welcome to the Natural Clinic Live. My name is Leonard Murphy. I opened the Natural Clinic in 2014. I had been a nutritional therapist for about 8 years at that time, and I was working with clients specifically with chronic fatigue. I found that when my clients worked with other therapies at the same time, that their health improved much quicker and that they stayed healthier for longer. So once I opened the clinic, I worked to bring some of the therapists that I heard great things about to work with me as part of the team in the clinic. And we're now at 19 therapists working there. So we are going from strength to strength, and it is really an amazing place. So one of the more recent therapists to start working in the clinic is Shannon Bester. Shannon is a kinesiologist who has worked all over the world and has had some incredible transformations in the clinic already. So I'd like to welcome Shannon and let him talk a little bit about himself. Shannon, welcome to the team. And I'd like to ask you the first question, which is, what is kinesiology?
We, as I'm a health kinesiologist specifically, that's what I studied. And we basically, the fact is that the body communicates through muscle response testing. So on an unconscious level, your body knows what it wants and what it needs to be balanced, healthy, energetically balanced and healthy. So, and the way that it speaks to us is through muscle response testing. Sometimes our logical mind gets in the way of things. We think it's one thing, we think we must take this type of nutrition or we must go on this diet. But meanwhile, on an unconscious level, our bodies know exactly what we need. And the way we access that communication is through muscle response testing or kinesiology.
And you find where the issues are through using the muscle testing? Yeah.
So we basically ask questions which the client doesn't answer. We just ask the question, we ask the body the question, and then we get the response. It is binary, so either the muscle, it stays strong and it's a yes, and if it goes weak, it's a no. So okay. We've got those two options, and we can refine it through our questioning.
That sounds, yeah, like when you were doing that to me, it got to some points very quickly, and I found it was just cutting away at some of the millions of other questions that would normally have to be answered, let's say in a questionnaire or something like that. So it was a very fast way of figuring out what was really going on. And so you can find out if there's something wrong, if there's someone reacting to something like the food, obviously, but you don't work specifically in that field. You go a little bit deeper than that.
Yeah, so we're known for people, most people come to us for allergy testing, so which it's very convenient. So you put a food on somebody, and then the arm immediately goes weak. So that works with anything. It works with cleaning products. It works with foods, nutrition, supplements, anything like that. But then also we deal a lot with psychological things and emotional stresses that we might be facing. So it's looking at that as well, because we find that that drains a lot of energy or causes energy blocks in the body. And once you clear those, health is restored pretty quickly and easily. So it's identifying traumas that might have occurred to us many, many years ago. We might have even forgotten them, or it could be a shock, which is due to something else happening in our lives. It could be a belief system, something that we've sort of taken on from our childhood, or somebody said something to us and we've just incorporated that as a belief system. You know, for instance, when we were growing up, somebody might have said we were an idiot, or when we dropped a cup or saucer, and that we just carry that belief system with us the rest of our lives on an unconscious level, and it affects us, and it affects the energy flow around our systems.
And someone might not even remember, as you say, what that issue is. So even if it's something that they're, curious about whether it was a negative thing to happen to them at some point in their life, they don't need to remember it per se as something traumatic. It can be something that our body saw as traumatic, and that our nervous system remembers as being traumatic. So I think what I've seen is that we don't have to recognize it ourselves sometimes as being traumatic. it's our body that thought at the time, or the child version of us that thought it was traumatic. So when you go in to look for that information, it'll present itself to you without you having to remind the client or work around that trauma issue with the client specifically. Is that right?
Yeah, that's perfectly correct. And sometimes a light bulb goes on for the client when we mention the trauma or a word relating to that. On a logical level, sometimes clients question it, but then when they just relax a bit and think about it, then suddenly the light bulb comes on.
Yeah. Other
times it's what we think is a trauma and what the body identifies as a trauma, two different things. So I had a client recently which we're trying to identify these issues, and she had quite a few traumas, deaths in the family, deaths of friends, but the one that was causing the problems or the blockages was a motor car accident, and she wasn't even severely injured in the motor car accident, and it wasn't even on her radar. And then when we tested, it was none of the others, which seemed much more traumatic. It was the motor car accident that we had to deal with. So obviously there were some issues in and around that accident that that caused these blockages in her system.
With something like that, what's the next step? What do you work at to resolve that?
What we do in health kinesiology, just to get the energy moving once again, is we work on the meridians and the chakras. So it allows for that free flow of energy to move again, and then the body starts its own healing system. So we're trying to use the body's innate wisdom and its own healing powers to do the job.
Yeah.
And
body knows best.
Yeah, the body knows best, and the energy system knows best. So we just open up those pathways. We identify which meridian or meridians we're dealing with, which acupressure points we are holding or tapping. Sometimes we even put magnets on those points, just to stimulate that flow and get that going again. Yeah.
Very interesting. I think that a lot of the people that we see coming to the clinic, there's such a diversity of issues and symptoms and conditions that people come for. Is there a specific type of person that comes to see you, or that you've worked with over the years and around the world, worked with specific cases that you see more of than others?
Generally, it's people who've gone down the traditional medical route, and they just haven't made their progress in healing. So with therapists and alternative therapists, as we are called, we are last resort. So I get a lot of that. Specific issues, I get a lot of allergy testing, allergy checking, and also a lot of hormonal work, menopausal type hormonal work, and also dealing with Lyme disease. It varies, because we're going back upstream is the important thing here. So it doesn't really matter what the issue is. It's going as far as possible upstream to try and sort out where the blockages are that are causing the issue downstream.
When you say upstream, you mean what do you mean by upstream specifically?
Going back and finding out the trauma, the emotional, the stress that we might be going through, a core belief that we might be carrying with us that is causing this blockage. Downstream, a lot of times with downstream medication or medicine, we're just plugging the holes, and we might plug this hole that's leaking, which is the issue, but the pressure carries on building upstream again, and then we develop another hole somewhere else. So we might sort out a food allergy, we plug that hole, but then the upstream issue of a specific trauma, for instance, that motor car accident, which we've never dealt with, or the death of somebody we've never dealt with, the pressure keeps on building again. So it might manifest again in asthma or eczema. So when we say go upstream, sort out the issues upstream, and then downstream, you shouldn't be getting more issues, not for a long time anyway.
I find that very interesting because the what I've learned from working with so many different types of therapists in the clinic is that the issue doesn't stop in our brain, because I think in typical ways of working with our health, we'd have kind of tried to figure things out, but the figuring out might not happen because it might not be in that part of the nervous system. Your nervous system doesn't stop at the brain; it continues on throughout the rest of the body. And I think that's something that when someone presents with even something like a sore knee, the issue really behind that can be something that happened in the past that isn't specifically physical. So, and if there's a tendency for weakness in that area, that might be where something specifically goes. So that's something that I've seen happen so many different times in the clinic. And from because of all the different types of therapists that are there, it keeps on coming up, and I keep on seeing it over and over again. And I find that interesting from the perspective of trauma and emotional issues that people have come to the clinic for, and that you're working with issues that you might see with someone that comes to you for finding out why their skin is reacting so badly. And it might not be a physical issue. It could be something to do with their nervous system from back in the past. And but it can extend beyond that to like an area of the knee that they were never associated with a trauma, but it actually can be because of something like that. So it's becoming from my own science background of the nutritional therapy, I've learned so much more about your types of therapy where you're working with the whole nervous system of the entire body. It doesn't just stop at the neck and isn't just the brain. So it's really, really interesting. How have you found? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say yes, and your sore knee isn't the same as my sore knee, or your rheumatoid arthritis isn't the same as mine. So, we get medication across the board for rheumatoid arthritis, but it doesn't really solve the issue. What started your rheumatoid arthritis is not necessarily what started my rheumatoid arthritis. Yeah. So that's the key thing there. We've got to identify what is behind upstream, what is causing my rheumatoid arthritis, and not look at rheumatoid arthritis across the board.
Yeah,
it's looking at it on an individual level, and that's where I think kinesiology comes into its own, because we're testing it and we're asking these questions for the individual, for you, Leonard, or for myself. It is for that person or that client specifically.
I'd see that. I remember when I was working with clients with chronic fatigue, I would always look at their timeline and see where, like, about a year previous to them coming to me, there would have been some event. So I started to see very clearly then that something caused their digestive system that wasn't, that suddenly they changed their diet or something like that. It was a traumatic event about 9 months to a year before they started to have severe symptoms. And I always thought that's so fascinating. I could see it in almost every person that I spoke to that had come for chronic fatigue that started with digestive issues as well and everything else chucked in there. I would see an event, so I think we're very good at we're very strong, we're very good at surviving things, but then something comes along and says, just gives us a speed wobble or knocks us off kilter. And it's at that point that our reserves are really put to the test, and sometimes will have a negative effect.
Yeah, and I think in this modern day and age, there's a lot of adverse conditions out there that, we've got a lot more toxins in the system, in the environment, in our food. There's a lot more stress, which is loaded on us through media, social media. So we see a lot more as well. So, we add all these things up, and that dam just breaks eventually.
A lot of pressure.
And, a lot of pressure, and there's no release valves. Our release valves aren't there to handle these things. So,
Speaking of pressure, especially a build-up of things over the last couple of years, at this stage, how have you been finding clients throughout the pandemic? How have you seen more stresses there, or anything specific?
Yes, the clients are. I think there's a lot in the media on the whole pandemic, and I think a lot of the media is geared around to fear, and people are very fearful of the situation. So yeah, there has been a build up, and people are anxious. So we've got to handle the anxiety in and around the whole pandemic, and also help people see that or help people handle that, the energy system to handle that anxiety and to cope with it.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing an increase in people coming to us for anxiety at this stage in the clinic. I think it's a real sign of the times that there's an increase in that, and you can definitely see, as you say, reasons behind that as well at the moment, especially. And there's so much uncertainty about the future as well still. But it's great that people are reaching out and finding help for that as well, which is fantastic to see. The last question, really, I suppose, is how does someone that wants to come to see you, what is their experience when they come to see you? They come in, they'll book you, they'll probably they'll be able to book you through the clinic, and they come into the clinic. The experience of them finding their, to give them a visual almost of what it's like, of finding their issue first, and then what you do specifically to work with that issue. So just from a timeline perspective, how does that whole system work when a client is coming to see you?
Well, I get the client to fill in a client information form, which we all do. It gives us a background of what the client feels is the issue and where it started from. So we have a look at that, go through that. I go through that with the client. And then we start by balancing the client energetically. So the client, we can get an accurate idea of the response. So the response from the client is accurate. And then we start testing. So depending what the issue is, if it's an allergy, then we would start testing and looking for the cause of the allergy. So it could be a food, it could be a cleaning product in the house, it could be anything. So, it's wide open. So, there's general parameters which we start off in. So we start off with a broad parameter and then narrow it down. So if it's a food, we test, okay, we ask the question, is it food? And the answer is yes. The main culprits are gluten, dairy, so we'll start with that. And if it's not that, then it could be anything. Then we'll break it down into food groups, so carbohydrates, or would it be fruits, or would it be seeds, or would it be nuts? So we'd break it down like that. And then also looking at the type of trauma. If there is a trauma, can also track it back to a year. So we can also find out which year it is, and then identify the trauma. And if the client doesn't know what the trauma is, we would sometimes use a word or a phrase to stimulate what we're looking for. So it's almost going through the back door. Instead of identifying the issue directly through the front door, we would go through the back door and try and get the same stressor on the client, and then treat that with balancing the meridians, or maybe it's a chakra that we need to balance. And then identifying, and then after you've done all of that, we would also look at what we call adjunctives. So we would look at the client's nutrition, their diet, are there any issues in the diet, and then also look at the supplements. So clients that I get are generally health conscious, and a lot of them take a lot of supplements. And I like to test the supplements to see what is working and what isn't working. We tend to spend a lot of money on supplements, and sometimes it's a waste of money. We don't need those supplements.
Yeah.
And when we test the supplements, we can eradicate certain supplements and only take the necessary ones that will assist with the healing. So we use it as not as the main part of the healing. It just assists and speeds up the process.
That's right. That was where I found that extremely handy towards the end of our first session. You'd asked me to bring in my supplements with me. and I do take a few supplements. And you not only were you able to tell me that certain ones just weren't worth it, and there were some of the more expensive ones as well, but you were able to tell me of ones that would work much better from that perspective as well, which was really, really brilliant. Because I wasn't getting a benefit from getting the stuff that I thought was the best stuff, which was the expensive stuff. I was able to get simpler, more direct nutrients. And I actually find a difference. I definitely find a difference from changing the supplements. So that was just something added on to the end of the session rather than actually all of the other benefits that came with the session as well. What does the client feel? Can you describe some of the benefits? Because I know them, but what are some of the benefits that clients feel once they come to see you?
Some clients, I don't know if this is the answer to your question, is some clients feel an immediate benefit. Other clients don't. It depends on the client. So I get a response sometimes from clients where there is a benefit very quickly. The body works a little bit differently. It takes a while from normal traditional medicine. When we pop a pill, we get a very quick response to treat the symptom. But when we do a healing through the energy system, it always takes a while. It takes a bit of a longer. The body works at a slower process. So sometimes it takes a while for the client to feel the difference. And sometimes, and generally with our type of work, the healing is very subtle. And I found that happened with me as well, that you actually don't realize that you are better. So it's all of a sudden down the line, oh, I don't have that ache or that pain, or my skin has cleared up. And it's a gradual process. And I bumped into clients before in the shops or wherever, and they recognize me, and then they say to me, oh, okay, the last time I saw you was 6 months ago. Oh, it's cleared up. So they didn't even realize that it's happened. Yeah. So it's I don't know if that answers your question. There's two extremes. The one's immediate, and the one is it can take a while. So it depends on the client.
I get that. I remember saying to you in my session with you, my initial session, that I was like, I felt immediately better with something that we were working with, and then as it progressed, as time went on, when I went home, there was also more improvement over the following days as well. And I think we have this great inbuilt ability to forget pain. So it's a human an advantage of being sometimes, and so people forget that they've been through that issue, and that's probably as well why the body remembers it, but the person forgets it. So often you'll forget, because I actually forgot that I had that kind of release when I was in the session with you, until you mentioned it there again. So we forget our pain and forget that someone did something to make it stop, which is amazing.
And it is when you're working with the energy system, when you're working in balancing the energy, once those floodgates are opened, it is very powerful, and the body works at its own pace as well. So some people it works very quickly, and other people it works at a slower pace. Everybody's different. That's what we find with muscle testing, is everybody's different. Everybody has different needs, and their body is adjusted completely differently. Yeah.
Well, that's very true. We see so much diversity coming into the clinic as well, and it's never one shoe fits all, and it's never one therapy fits all, or one therapist fits all, or anything to that effect. But that's why there's so much diversity there. So Shannon, that is us finishing up at this stage. So I just want to say thank you so much. That was very interesting. And if someone wants to get in touch with you, I'll let you describe how someone does that.
Well, they can go to my website, or probably the easiest way is to go to the Natural Clinic. There's a link on there. You just click on the link and you can book. The booking system's straightforward and simple. And that's probably the easiest way of doing it.
Keep it simple and make that choice. That's what I think is the thing. It's something that I always put into my anything I'm writing out, is that today could be the start of it, where you actually work with that thing, or where you actually make that change, and it can be as simple as a couple of clicks. But I think it's because I think people sometimes wait and just come in, get started. But Shannon, thank you so much. Really enjoyed that. I'm going to end this recording now. And hopefully people will get in touch.
Thank you. Thanks, Leonard.
Take care. See you, Shannon.
Cheers.